So very, very basic question is, so what people might ask, and people do ask, what the Buddhist teaching can offer more than other religions and other philosophies. So what is the difference? Because they all teach some kind of release from suffering and happy life or meaningful life. So what is there a good reason to follow Buddhist teaching instead of others?
Well, do other religions teach freedom from suffering?
They would say yes, like happiness in the heavens.
Right. Okay. So I think that's the difference. The Buddhist teaching offers you freedom from suffering here and now without having to wait for the heavens. And as the Buddha himself said, it's directly verifiable by those who make the effort. So that's kind of the difference. And actually, yeah, you could probably sum up like that. That's also why, for me as well, I mean, I was in the beginning reading every religion when I was interested, because I was trying to learn, but that was something that I could not come to terms with, was the idea of you reach a certain point where you're just left with faith, and you just have to have faith now, and things will work out. And that was not good enough for me. So I wanted basically something that would not require faith as an end game, and something that you can verify, and then you don't have to do anything anymore. And the only religion that I found that was the Buddhist teaching. So
some religions like Taoism or maybe in Christianity, they also require some developing of wisdom. So it's not just faith related.
Well, it is all within faith and faith based. Like, you develop wisdom up to the point of belief in God, but you do not question that. And on top of it, doesn't matter what practice you do, even the most austere Christian monks, it's still, that practice is secondary to the will of God, who will then free you from suffering. And if anybody is sort of self-transparent and authentic, that's not a good deal. You don't want any other being to have a say in your well-being. And that's what the Buddha himself sort of insisted on. He said the gods themselves are subject to the same things you are subjected to. And that's the main difference. So you make the effort yourself for freedom, and there is no intermediary or some medium in between.
So there's no faith in Buddhism, or is also element of faith there?
The element of faith, as I said many times before, it's the faith you would have in a doctor. So you know you're ill, you're seeking for the medicine, so you have faith that this doctor might help you or that doctor might help you, to the extent that on faith you take the medicine, but not for the sake of taking the medicine or for the sake of faith. You take it for the sake of health. So if you're not curing as a result of the medicine, then you don't have to keep that faith.
But one has to have faith in the Buddha's teaching.
Well, one has to apply the medicine. So one has to have faith that the medicine might work, because otherwise why would you apply it in the first place? So the purpose of faith then, it's not just, don't question it, it's more like, this person or this teaching might be able to help me or help my existential situation, so thus I will do what the medicine prescribes. I will keep the precepts, I will be virtuous, I will reflect on my actions, develop transparency towards my intentions, and see if it works. So that's the extent of faith.
So since you don't have a god or worshipping the god in Buddhist teaching, what is then the good reason to practice virtue? Because like all the religions, they have some kind of commandments, rules, emphasizing good behavior for the sake of heaven. Then
the reason is the most direct reason, which is basically taming of your mind. Because if you start practicing Buddhism, or even learning about it, you'll see that the possibility of suffering, any misfortune in the world that you might experience does not come from the world. It comes from your mind. And the reason why it comes from your mind is because that mind is not trained. And you cannot train the mind unless you train your body first and actions in virtue. As simple as that. And when you have developed virtue and have trained the mind, then you cannot suffer amidst the suffering.
Is there some kind of thing, as they would say, original sin? Is something like that applied in Buddhism?
No.
but there will be that the farm doesn't have its own beginning.
Yeah.
So, but there is also teaching about 5 and then also 8 precepts. That's something that Upasakas are going to take, commitment to those rules. So, so that we don't present it as something, oh, this is, if you want to be Buddhist, you have to have 5 or 8 precepts. So why, for example, should be following 5 precepts and also 8?
It just depends how far you want to go in practice. So I guess for somebody who hasn't followed any precepts, 5 precepts is a good place to start, because that's how you will learn. See where the sense restraint lies, and the point of it. Then if you want to take it further, you increase the restraint in terms of the 8 precepts. But it's all for the purpose of training, because yes, you will often have people take them on a religious level, like I keep the precepts, therefore I'm Buddhist, or I'm born Buddhist, therefore I keep the precepts. I mean, it's good, but it will not result in wisdom.
Could we quickly go through what these precepts are?
So the 5 precepts, the first one is no killing, no stealing, no misconduct in sensual pleasures, we can define that, no lying, and no taking of intoxicants, alcohol, drugs, anything that would sort of contribute towards laxness of the mind. Misconduct in sexual and sensual pleasures means basically, although a person is not celibate, they are restrained, so they don't overdo it. They don't allow their life to revolve around pleasures and gaining pleasures and seeking, but exercising some sort of moderation and sense restraint. So yeah, even that in itself, just 5 precepts, if taken rightly, can result in taming your mind to some degree, because that's where it starts, really. The bodily actions and choices we make on account of them. You're trying to train an animal. If there is no discipline, saying no, patience, waiting, enduring, just let it eat whenever it wants, it's not going to listen to you. Same with the mind. If you act whenever there is a desire or a thought towards it, and no restraint, even fear of enduring that little discomfort of saying no to yourself, then the mind will keep doing that and it will be controlling you. So that's what that needs to be developed. It's not going to happen magically, like miraculously. It will just stop on its own, because that's not what it does.
So these are the 5, and then you also have 8 and
yes.
7. Right?
So the 8 precepts is the 3rd precept. The misconduct in sexuality becomes full celibacy, and then you add another precept like you don't eat after the noon. So like slightly increased moderation in eating. Then don't like sleeping on high and luxurious places, which is basically more like, again, on a practical level, don't just indulge in sleep. Have a slightly less comfortable bed that will prevent you from laying in it for 12 hours and stuff like that, because that all just contributes towards mental and physical sluggishness. And beautification. So again, being overly concerned about your sensual appearance. So beauty, perfumes. Another added precept to the 5 is that entertainment. So which is shows, dances, music, stuff like that. 10 precepts is that's like when a person kind of joins the order as a novice, as a beginner. So then you give up money, gold, silver, valuables like that you can trade with, money basically. Mm-hmm. You don't handle it, so you're kind of not as independent, I suppose, in that sense. Just creates even a greater sense of urgency. And what's that's it, yeah. That's it, broken into 2, then.
Yeah, one is broken into 2, yeah. So become entertainment and beautification separate role.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, one of the 8 is separated into 2, so you get 9, and then you give up the money as 10.
So 9 doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So the main purpose behind these precepts is basically to tame your mind, to calm your mind enough to then be able to attain certain
No.
insights.
Well, yeah, I
Is that-
suppose, yeah, to see things clearer. Like, as I said, even if you don't necessarily, hey, drama. Even if you don't have some, lofty goals in terms of practice, just being able to say no to yourself and endure your own state of mind, that's an accomplishment. The life will be much better. Because, the mind doesn't listen to you. It's nice when it's in a good mood, but it's not nice when it's not in a good mood. But you're paired with it. You have to endure it. The most people's concerns revolve around trying to change the mind or control the mind and make it obey them. But that's not the problem. The problem is simply that you want mind to be a certain way, and then you resist it when it's not that way. So it's on you. If you stop resisting it, if you learn how to be patient and endure it, nothing that the mind can throw at you can bother you. So that's the whole idea of learning also how to disown it correctly. Because the idea of that ownership that the Buddha often talk about, it's the idea of control. You want to control things that are not in your control, and you don't want to let go of the idea that they are in your control. So that's like you suffer twice as much. That doesn't mean now you just let go of everything, just surrender. No, don't let go of the precepts. Don't let go of taming that mind, but don't confuse it as something that belongs to you, because it doesn't.
And what you're talking about now is non-self, isn't it?
Exactly,
This is one of the big concepts.
Yeah, that's
main concepts.
it's again, even the not. That's why we wouldn't necessarily, or quite often, would not even talk about, is there self, is there no self, and provide answers to that, because it's not the point of answering an intellectual query. It's more like, if you train correctly, tame your mind, practice sense restraint, your experience will start approximating the experience of not self, and eventually it will be the experience of not self, the non-control, not like negation of everything, nothing is my problem, or like, no, I'm not trying to control things that I know are not in my control, nor do I suffer on account of them when they change, because you suffer is when you still try to control them.
How do you know you're in non-self?
Sorry?
How do you actually know you're there? In a free will, non-self?
By fulfilling the training and not being able to suffer on account of your mind changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter how your mind changes, it doesn't take you with it. And then you're not affected anymore. And that's what not self is. When sensual desire doesn't move you, when disagreeable things don't overwhelm you and cause ill will, when nothing to do does not scare you, bore you, and fill you with anxiety, when you're at ease with your own mind and whichever state it's in.
Mm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Buddha never talked or didn't speak much of happiness. Rather, he spoke of freedom from suffering.
Yeah.
This is what you're saying now, isn't it?
Yeah. Basically, happiness comes when you undo everything that makes you suffer.
Mm.
But if you start talking about happiness, people that just want to go straight into happiness without undoing everything that makes them suffer.
Yeah.
So that's why I avoided it in that way.
It seems in Buddhism also can happen like two extremes. You have the ones who take the rules quite religiously, like Five Precepts and so on. That's especially in Asian countries. And then you have people who, maybe in the West, who just think Buddhism is just about calming the mind and meditating, but they don't purify the virtue.
Yeah.
So the Buddhists didn't go to these two extremes.
Yeah, that's why, like, if you do it for the reasons of practice and mind development, you will find the right balance between the two. That's something you can just teach people, but it's up to every individual to really clarify that and do it rightly. Yeah.
Generous advice, it seems that lay people in Buddha's time, they were following 5 precepts, and on Upasaka, 8 precepts. So that's kind of interesting to see this, how the Buddha was emphasizing that one, at least once a week, let's say. And that's one thing we try to emphasize in the Upasaka group. Maybe can you say something more about 8 precepts, why one should take at least once a week 8 precepts?
Well, for the same reason why one would be keeping the 5
Mhm.
in the first place. So as I said, it's just an addition, an increase of restraint. If a person does keep the 5 precepts and wants to practice, then yeah, it's good to take on 8, because if you just immediately go into full sense restraint, you might not be able to do it. So it's like just to train yourself to gradually increase wholesome ways of saying no to your mind and gratuitous, pointless desires that the mind uses to control you with. And also, yeah, to see, are you scared of doing it? Are you scared of saying no to like things that you know are not necessary, but you're kind of used to certain habits, sleeping long, eating whenever you feel like it, not necessarily when you're hungry, scratching the itch whenever it itches. Can you endure it for even, a day?
Mm.
So if you can't, then that's the work outlined for you. That's exactly what you need to train in.
Where is the borderline between being a good person and a bad person? Okay, breaking 5 precepts. There's never good in killing and lying and so on. What about, like, let's say, listen music? Is these?
Oh no, that's not now on the level of being good or bad. That's more like on the level of training your mind now. So there's nothing wrong with music or things that 8 precepts cover, but there is a lot wrong with it if you want to tame your mind to go beyond desire. So, but that's why it needs to be done gradually.
Isn't there a lot of suffering in taming your mind?
Yeah.
So you're actually suffering.
Yeah, in the same sense, like, you go to a doctor and he tells you the reason for your illness is your bad diet. So first you need to start eating right things and, avoid lots of other things that used to give you pleasure. Stop drinking and going out. So you're going to suffer a lot more. But then you're going to become cured. And then you won't suffer at all. So it's like getting worse before you get better. Taking a bitter medicine that will cure you, in the meantime, it's going to make you feel miserable. There are people even in Buddha's time that kind of had the same questions. And it's not that everybody will suffer on account of it, or that everybody will suffer to the same extent. The amount of your suffering will be determined by the amount of your addiction towards sensuality. So the weaker the addiction, the lesser the suffering will be. The stronger the addiction, the stronger the suffering will be. Withdrawal. It's exactly the same thing. If you are kind of, able to say no to yourself, you're not going to suffer a lot more when you start increase that precept and sense restraint. But if you've been running around wild and just acting whenever there was an itch, whenever there was an intention or pressure, you'll suffer a lot, yeah.
Could that be directly connected to karma, the concept of karma?
Well, no. I mean, the concept of karma has kind of been taken quite a bit out of the context. It's connected to the concept of the direct karma of your choices. So you have become so addicted. You would not have become so addicted if you haven't been perpetually choosing things out of your addiction. As simple as that. An addict is not born an addict. He becomes so through your own actions and chasing pleasures in an unrestrained manner. So that's the responsibility. So yeah, it's very karma related, but not in that eventual retribution sense or something like that, or what you've done lifetimes ago or something. How people like to believe and sort of use it to explain why things are happening. No, it's just if you keep choosing things out of sensual desires, sensual desire is something that's controlling you. If you keep acting out of anger and ill will and irritation, means those states of mind are controlling you. You're not able to withstand them without acting out.
So is it a personal subjective viewpoint or is it a Buddhist viewpoint?
That's the, let's say, early suttas point. So the early Buddhist teaching point. Not necessarily, if you Google Buddhism today, there's going to be a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with what the Buddha was teaching. So I don't know where you're coming from with that question. That's why I'm specifying it.
Well, it's kind of specific because who defines what is sensual?
Sorry?
Who judges and defines what is sensual?
Well, the Buddha did, yeah. That's why he laid out a teaching revolving around it. That's why you do need to take it on trust. See, if you tell this is the addiction, an addict will not necessarily see it. But if addict develops some self-awareness and starts looking for help, and then hears the Buddha talking about the addiction, recognizes some parts of it, still not convinced, but starts doing it, then he'll become free from it, and then he won't need Buddha to tell him any further because he verified it for himself. But yes, that certain degree, as I said before you came, of faith is necessary. Not like, believe the Buddha, but more like believe that this doctor has the right medicine, but the only way to find out is to start doing it. You cannot be sure that he's the right doctor that will cure you until you apply the medicine the way he says you should apply it. So faith for somebody who has applied correctly the Buddha's teaching disappears. It becomes confirmed knowledge that this works in terms of taming your mind. That's it, directly verifiable.
So we stay now within those 5 precepts. Kind of sounds quite clear. Many we count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 8. But in practice, sometimes some things are a bit challenging. Let's say in the first one, you had euthanasia or assisted suicide. So how we then?
I mean, how often that happens to people? That's not really a thing you
It's
have to
not
worry
really-
about. But again, it's no killing.
So it's quite clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't kill. As simple as that.
It can happen, for example, with animals that we have aging.
Again, you don't kill.
You don't kill, yeah.
Yeah.
So that can happen quite often. That one.
Also, I think the triple gem is a very, I don't know, it's a very popular concept, isn't it? Everybody knows that Buddhism and the triple gem. Could you say a few words about that?
For 3 refuges, yeah.
3 refuges, yeah.
Right, but they are. You mean as right? Well, like the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha, the refuge to the Buddha is the doctor.
So you're taking refuge in the Buddha. How?
Well, yeah,
In
again,
what
even that.
sense?
See,
Yeah.
taking refuge back in the suttas meant, oh, okay, no, I know that this doctor is making sense. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Let me remember me as a follower of your teaching. Kind of, I took refuge in what you're teaching. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life because I see benefit of it. That's what it meant. But now it means basically the same as, declaring yourself a Christian or something else similar. Just, I took refuge and I'm a Buddhist. It was like, yeah, but... And often people would be taking refuges and not even keeping the precepts. They're just these empty declarations.
So this is directly connected.
Yeah, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, basically. The Buddha is the doctor, the Dhamma is his teaching, and the Sangha is the disciples that followed it and cured themselves. That's it. So it's like the Sangha, the refuge in Sangha means, okay, so there are other people that did it successfully. So I take refuge in the idea of that so that I can do it successfully.
Make this possible. So actually that completes whole circle. So only then was probably established when the Anyakundanya, the first person who got the right view after listening to teaching. Then it said that the Dhamma will start turning. So it's kind of really completed, because it doesn't mean very much just to have Buddha and Dhamma if there's not somebody else who gets awakened by those teachings. So it kind of completes
For
together.
mutual support, isn't it?
Yeah,
us
and
on
they took
track.
together, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
If you have access to those who have follow the instruction of the doctor and cure themselves, then yes, you can learn from them extra. But it's not on the level of devotion or something that just people declare and feel saved on account of it. You still have to do the work.
In the 4th precepts, we have also, usually it's kind of loosely translated as not lying, but we know it actually says in Pali, wrong speech, which includes lying, includes harsh speech.
That's probably the most practical one. That's why often even in the suttas, it would be expanded, that particular one, because that is like in the society what people would be struggling with. So it's taken in not lying, but not gossiping, pointless speech, harsh speech, spreading rumors, offensive. So it's just practice of sense restraint when it comes to choosing things you're going to say and why you're saying them. So that means, again, you're kind of adding a layer of that restraint. There is like the physical aspect of it. You don't do things with your body, but now there is this verbal aspect where you just have to endure wanting to say something, but it's rooted in the wrong reasons. So the mind is pressuring you to do it, and you feel, and like even if nobody blames you for doing it, if everybody expects you to do it, you know that it's rooted in the pressure of your mind that's exhibiting, and that's why you don't do it, because no other way you'll be able to learn it.
But surely you can speak angrily to someone and have a calm heart and do it for their benefit to get through the layers of ego.
Well, again, not according to the early suttas, not according to the what was taught originally, because it's a kind of a contradiction in terms. You're either angry mind
No,
or
you're
your
not.
calm mind.
No, you raise your voice to make the effect.
Well, raising the voice does not necessarily equal anger. So what do you mean by raising the voice?
Well, it depends to what degree, but to some degree, you can show anger by a loud voice, but be calm inside for the benefit of another person.
Right. Well, no, I don't agree with that, because I agree with the part you can raise your voice, but I don't agree that you have to raise your voice when you're angry, or that raising your voice
No.
means you're always angry.
No, it's just occasionally you have to cater your intonation to the other person.
Yes.
Basically,
And-
admonishing or being sharper.
Exactly. And you can do that without being angry.
Exactly, but that's the point.
Well, no, but if you're angry...
but you can be perceived as angry, but
Oh yeah,
you're
no,
not
that doesn't
angry.
matter. That doesn't matter. Yeah, if you're truly not angry, that's fine. Even if everybody thinks, oh, he's harsh and angry. But what I'm trying to clarify is, as long as, as I said, there might be a justification to raise your voice, to make a point, and externally everybody will see that, and maybe will not even be thinking you're angry, but you know you are angry. And that's why you shouldn't do it.
Oh no, I agree.
Equally,
if you're angry,
exactly.
But
Equally,
if
you
you're
have
not
people
angry,
who are very angry, but speak in a very, psychotherapeutical, soft, trained manner, full of anger and ill will, but never express it. So it's like speech is the result of it. So yes, there were cases even around the Buddhist time where some monks were just harsh the way they were speaking and saying things, and people thought they were really upset. And the Buddha said, well, no, it's just certain habits don't necessarily change. And if there is a purpose, even the Buddha himself was often, admonishing monks quite fiercely. But that does not equate that you're angry internally. So, yeah.
And good standard is also, it has to be helpful to the listener.
Yeah.
So that's the main requirement.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, you will know that if you're truly not angry.
yeah.
You will know where it's rooted. Like, if you're not angry, you will not have problem not saying it if you know it's not going to be heard or helpful or it's going to fall on deaf ears. Usually people can't see all of these implications because they're already angry. So, yeah, you must never act out of anger, but it doesn't mean you will always speak softly or gently or agreeably, for that matter.
Like training dogs, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Children. it's,
Yeah, children.
it's the same. I mean, yeah.
I think the most difficult and problematic for most of people is actually idle chatter. Sometimes it's difficult to know what about separating between two speeches, or speak Dhamma or being quiet,
Yeah.
or just what is the difference between like idle speech. Where is the borderline? Can we talk about politics and football, or
Well, borderline is always where your intentions are. Are you the one initiating it? Why are you doing it? Because you're bored or you can't bear the awkward silence, all these pressuring things in your mind that you're giving into? If somebody else starts it and if you don't reply, you'll be considered really rude, then that's a different reason. Then you would, as the Buddha say, you speak enough to sort of please the other person, but not to add more to it. So it does come down to knowing your intentions and why you're doing what you're doing whenever you're choosing to do it.
white lie? It's a lie.
Yeah, that doesn't mean now you just go and sort of spouting truth in everyone's face all the time. It's just like,
Only is beneficial.
if asked, you say it. If not, you don't need to say it. You don't need to stick your nose in.
So they're good lies.
Sorry?
So are they good lies?
Not if it's rooted in intention to lie.
No, but if it's rooted in the intention of saving the other person pain,
If it's still a lie, so it's still against the precept. It's still against that training precept.
You can
The
be
training aspect
quiet.
of it. Yeah. You don't have to say it, but you certainly can afford to not lie, ever.
We generally, I don't know, we generally try to find ways to make ourselves better, to make our circumstances better, to somehow improve ourselves. We're striving for perfection, and in this sense, the Buddha's teaching is very radical, because there is no goal somewhere out there along.
Yeah, well, it's very radical in the sense that life is very radical. It's just
Yeah.
that people ignore those certain aspects. The three divine messengers, sickness, aging and death. You
Yeah.
might not live to be 50, 60, 70, 80. And even if you do, even that will feel quickly when it comes. You know, people get sick, young people get sick and die. So it's like presumption that we're going to live a long time, that you're going to have enough time for everything. And even then, you kind of implicitly think you're never going to die in that sense. Like, because if people would start thinking about that, even on a daily level, they would be making very different choices eventually. They would not be able to kind of live carelessly and like disregarding things and so on, and or even selfishly in that sense. Yeah. So that's how the Buddha himself turned to the practice when he saw the old person, sick person, and dead person, basically. Yeah. Like the inevitable. It cannot. That's not something you can even conceive how to avoid.
So also Buddhism offers quite strong this kind of monastic movement. So how is it essential for one to become a monk, or one can actually practice in right view as a layperson?
Theoretically, yeah. The right view you can get as a layperson, and even you could free yourself from sensual desires as a layperson. But that's, again, that was a hard thing to do in the Buddhist time as a layperson without having, lay life so busy and overwhelmed as they are today. So it's going to take effort and determination one way or the other.
Usually I would say the monastic life is maybe a shortcut. Well, supposed to be a shortcut.
Oh, no. It's more like an amplification. It's not a shortcut to anything. It's just going to amplify things sooner for you. So in that sense, yeah, I suppose it will maybe shorten the time, but not necessarily.
But isn't a monastic life a contradiction to practice compassion in the outside world?
Well, it depends on the definition of compassion. Yeah.
Well, charity,
good
works, compassion.
Yeah. That's one definition of compassion. Another definition that the Buddha himself had was the problem in the world is not lack of charity and lack of compassion. The problem is desire and people acting out of it and doing bad things to each other out of desire. Now imagine there is a group of individuals that free themselves from desire on account of teaching, and teaching others how to free themselves from desire on account of which they could do bad things to others. That's the cleanest compassion. You don't need to do anything to others if you're free from yourself completely. Free from desire, taught others how to be free from desire. That's the greatest contribution, because that's directly uprooting the actual problem of the world, which is human desire.
But isn't it rather insular?
Sorry?
I find it very insular. It's all about me. I
Well,
mean, that's what you're telling me.
Yeah,
it's all about me. So, I mean,
Where's the heart in this process?
Well, that's the whole point, kind of. Whether you take it to be on the level of the heart or helping others, you do it because you want to. So it's still about you. Being having it
we're
about
all connected,
you.
and obviously doing things for other people is for yourself as well.
Yeah.
That's quite clear.
Yeah.
But still, it seems very insular. Is peace be within? Well, peace is not just within; it's also without.
Right. I see what you mean.
Outside.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. It's outside because it's not inside. Inside is the root of the problem. It's like you have a polluted ocean because the streams on the top of the mountain are polluted, not because somebody's polluting the ocean. All of that eventually ends in the ocean, so the society is polluted, but it all comes from the individuals. So if all the individual streams would learn how to purify themselves from desire, ocean cannot remain polluted anymore. So yeah, it is very insular. But even like in the most mundane terms, let's putting the sort of committed practice to the side. Again, even if the ocean would be taught how to keep the 5 precepts, if somebody is to be repeating it enough and teaching the value to people, the world would be a better place. If you teach people how to behave slightly less out of their desire, slightly less out of their ill will, careless speech, intoxicants and everything else. Generally, the community would be nicer if certain standards of virtues are upheld, and the only way to do that is when people learn the value of it.
It's easier to practice virtue if you know why you're doing it for.
Yeah.
Not just because you might be watched by someone on there.
Yeah, that works only occasionally for a small group of people and not always. Yeah. the fear of authority and so on.
Also, we hear very diversified teachings within what's claimed so-called Buddhism. But when
Today.
today. But now, where to start as a beginner? What is the source? What material one should listen or read? Where is the main source of the teaching?
Yeah, I mean, like as I said, you Google Buddhism today, and probably 95% of it will be very removed from what the Buddha was actually teaching. And again, what the Buddha was actually teaching is something that people at least agree upon in a certain sense, that they know certain suttas and scriptures, they would say, were kind of the oldest, the closest to what he was saying. No matter how different schools have evolved, they do recognize that did come the first. So in that sense, that's the closest to the Buddhist instruction you can get. Even then, you don't really necessarily know that that's right, but you have to begin somewhere. You have to follow the doctor's prescription somewhere, and that's the suttas.
So suttas is a huge collection. This one one is just kind of afraid, intimidated by it, and also the style do one has to be almost like academic has to read all the suttas? Or?
No. It's depends on the person really and the inclinations. If that's what keeps you engaged, yes. If not, there is again so much suttas for beginners. Google it. So many websites, so many translated books. You just have to actually start reading it and making the work and trying to understand it, and then rereading it and reading it. But yes, ideally it would be nice if you just have somebody tell you what to do, or like direct answers to all of your questions quickly that you have. But one way or the other, you still have to do the work. So it's not something you can avoid reading and studying them for the sake of understanding, for the sake of that clarity.
Mostly having the Buddha is the teacher, fundamentally. But what about, is it good to have another teacher, like a living teacher, around?
Well, yeah, but I mean, you don't necessarily know whether what he's saying is right or not. So even that's taken, as I said, as a possible contribution to the whatever medicine the Buddha prescribed. So, but you still have to do it yourself. So it's not about finding a teacher that will sort of make your practice easier or lighter. It's more like clarifying the instruction. If you're clear enough, you don't need a teacher. If you're not clear enough, seek the clarity, but you still have to do it. So it has nothing to do with the person telling you.
Doesn't, I don't know, I think most teachings usually begin with the Four Noble Truths. Would you say that's the case? Or would you...
What do you mean begin?
When you begin with, because it begins with suffering, isn't it? But the
Right,
first noble
well,
truth is
yeah,
the
but the
truth
Four
of
Noble Truths
suffering.
means basically you understood the instruction.
Yeah.
So it's not you start with them, then you move on to something else.
Oh, that's right,
If you understood Four Noble Truths, basically you don't need anyone's help anymore. You know exactly what to do. You know exactly where the cause of suffering is rooted. And, you know, the answer is craving of your own mind, not the world. But until that's clear to you, you haven't seen the Four Noble Truths.
So could you maybe first say about the Four Noble Truths?
Right, for the Four Noble Truths, the suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path that would lead to that cessation. But it's really just one truth of understanding where suffering is. Because most minds would think suffering is in things, the world, others, this or that. But there is only one cause for suffering. So if the suffering is present in your mind, it's because that cause is present in your mind. And that cause is craving.
But can't suffering be healthy?
Sorry?
Can't suffering be healthy? If I'm suffering, I will strive to be a better person. Would be a very simple analysis.
Yeah. So as I said, that would be the suffering of taking the medicine that's unpleasant.
No. I'm suffering, therefore I will go and do something about the suffering, not necessarily cause it. If I see suffering in the world, I will therefore go and do something about it instead of cease that suffering within myself.
Right. No, but suffering in the world is not the suffering in yourself. That's not the same thing.
Well, inside you're going to be suffering.
You can go and help the world and diminish world suffering even if you don't suffer internally. It has nothing to do with each other. The internal suffering is what we're talking about.
But it's a motivating factor.
Well, no, the motivating factor is the desire, and you want to fulfill it.
It depends how you turn it.
No, again,
going back to my analysis of
Uh-huh.
good and bad lies, it's also you've got good and bad suffering.
Again, we're talking about two different levels of suffering. The suffering, the Four Noble Truths of suffering, is the internal suffering, the internal dis-ease, uneasiness of the mind. It's not the suffering of the world and that you might perceive in others. So what I'm saying is, the suffering you refer to is not much really to do with what we're talking about, in a sense of if you were to uproot the suffering inside of you, remove the craving, you can still help the world, as the Buddha himself did, and diminish their suffering.
For example, I'm suffering because I'm hungry. Now, I know Buddha decided to starve himself and then went into moderation and then decided to eat a lot. Now, or have I got that wrong?
Sort of, but it's
But
okay.
But because I'm hungry, I'm not going to therefore practice attachment, non-attachment. I will go and do something like go and get work so I can feed myself.
Right. So, well, again, that's two separate things. Hunger is not the cause of suffering, and that's, if you think that, it's because you haven't seen the Four Noble Truths, and that was the insight that the Buddha saw that nobody else did. Discomfort in the world is not the cause of suffering. Hunger is not the cause of suffering. Words of others, misfortune, being beaten, thrown, it's not the cause of suffering. Craving, phenomenon of craving being present in your mind means presence of suffering.
I think I suffer a lot looking at the world as it is.
It's basically how you react to it.
Yeah.
You know, suffering exists, and it's you how you react to it. You know, if you let it affect you, or if
But
you
I'm
don't let it
saying that
affect
you can let it affect you and you can do something positive.
Yeah, but you don't need to suffer because of suffering of others. You know, you can know it's bad, but you don't let it affect you to a level where you would suffer on account of others.
And you can still go and help them. It's not required. If suffering is required to make you do something about it, again, it means you haven't understood the suffering. So hunger, yeah, you can go and work and eat, but you don't need to suffer on account of it, which means you won't suffer on account of the pressure of work and having to earn. Because what if I don't get enough food? Well, hunger does not bother you in terms of suffering.
Yeah.
Death does not bother you in terms of suffering. Because even death in itself is not the cause of suffering. Illness is not the cause of suffering. Tanha means suffering, first noble truth. That's why it's like the universal truth that nobody else could see. Because yeah, it's not self-evident. If it were, every other person would become a Buddha. So the Buddha was able to see, despite the pressure of the world, despite being on the verge of death himself, to starvation and everything else, that those things is not where suffering is truly rooted in. It's the craving, like literally internal craving of your mind. Absence of that craving, regardless of circumstances, means peace. To the point where he said, even if highway robbers grab you, pin you down, chop your limbs one by one, if you fulfill the teaching, you won't suffer on account of it. Not that you will not experience the discomfort, but internal pain of the mind cannot be experienced ever again. That's what he called unshakable liberation. Not unshakable control of the world whereby nothing bad happens to you ever again. Quite the opposite. He's just unable to have the phenomenon of craving present in your mind, thus unable to suffer.
That is the craving for out there, isn't it? For things, phenomena, states.
Yes, it's kind of craving that's perpetuated through these actions that are rooted in desire, ill will, and that's we go back to the training of the precepts. It's not like a commandments that you must obey to. It's just like that's what keeps fueling the fire, the problem. So that's why you do it until you uprooted it. Then afterwards, do what you like, but there'll be certain things you'll be unable to do. Act out of craving and desire. Yeah.
So there's kind of hope in society that even they are occupied with their lay life, with family, jobs, living society, they can still develop this mindfulness, wisdom, and right view.
Yeah.
So this kind of hope is kind of worth to pursue this path and make an effort.
Yeah, it's just as I said, like work comes down to keeping the precepts, sense restraint, being able to contain your desires to the point to see what this craving is and what you're supposed to see. So that doesn't mean that you can just go on and do stuff you used to do when you didn't want to practice. Like to some extent, your life will probably have to start tailoring what you want to achieve. So you can't be unrestrained, going with people with they would sort of take you in these wrong directions. It's like, again, I want to train my dog, but I let it run with a wild pack of jackals and stuff. Well, it's not going to become tame, it's going to become wilder. So to some extent, circumstances need to sort of be kept in check, but yeah, you don't need to go and live on top of a mountain or somehow, because that's just might result in even more ignorance.
One thing we quite often emphasize is actually also, seclusion from sensuality, so on, but also seclusion, physical seclusions.
Yes, of course. But again, I wouldn't worry about that much in the beginning. That is useful later on, but it's really keeping the precepts. Those are the rules of training, let's say like that, the rules of engagement. So if the circumstances you're in keeps making you break the precepts, then you need to start revising a bit, just from that practical standpoint. If the circumstance does not push you to break the precepts, then fine, keep precepts, keep practicing, read the suttas, reflect, and so on. And then yes, if you have time, spend more time in seclusion without distractions and so on, but that's not something, I must aim for that and that's where my practice will begin. That sometimes people will have that view as well.
Maybe a different way of approaching this might be by asking you, what would you say that from the perspective of, say, the more older or traditional or Sutta Buddhism, Sutta Buddhism, what would from this perspective be some of the most common misconceptions or fallacies or problematic views that people usually associate with Buddhism in contemporary West? So which are the things that you come across that you think are
I think the first and obvious one is, I think people think meditation leads to enlightenment. As in, I don't have to do anything else. I just need to learn how to meditate and enlightenment will happen to me. And there are plenty of schools, non-Buddhist and later Buddhist, they would be teaching that, but that's nowhere near the original instruction. The second common thing would be Buddhism is for the world peace or something like that. That was never Buddhist concern either. It's just, those are kind of not necessarily something that would block people's progress, but it can certainly take them in the different directions of learning, I suppose. So it's fine. People can choose to go wherever they want, but I think the most important thing is to at least know the difference. Like knowing that what the kind of original instruction was and what it was concerned with, let's say like that. And then not confusing it for other things you come across.
Okay, related to this, maybe a sub-question would be, I would assume that a lot of people in contemporary society would have issues with this emphasis on trying to somehow transcend desire, given the fact that desire in one way or another is basically the foundation on which the contemporary society is pretty much built. And a lot of people do subscribe to some version of this hedonistic or semi-hedonistic worldview, or if they don't, they would at least want to retain this idea of, well, I can still enjoy my desires without falling prey to them. So how would one bring closer to the contemporary person this notion of why desire is ultimately unfulfilling? I'm actually here kind of hinting at that lovely video, very short video that you made. It was one of your first ones, I think, where you basically show why desire is unfulfilling, fundamentally unfulfilling.
No one wants sensuality. That one, huh?
Precisely,
yeah. Well, again, even that video will make sense only to a person that kind of is already aware of its own situation. If you just say it to anybody randomly, they're not going to see it. So you can't bring this the original instruction will never be mainstream. I mean, it was mainstream when the Buddha was alive. That's it. After he passed away, it started to decline because it goes against the whole world. I mean, that's what he himself said. The one who practices swims against the stream, going against the grain of samsara in the world that has its own direction. So going around preaching to people that desires are bad is just not really going to work. But those that are willing, that do recognize, that are dissatisfied with, their mind or the certain aspects of the situation, then they could perhaps hear it, or at least know the difference, and then maybe choose to do something about it. So in other words, person that wants to be helped can be helped. Otherwise...
Okay, so what if still we do not, let's say, completely abandon this proposition or this idea, and maybe we have someone, let me paraphrase this, maybe we have someone who says, I do have a sense that something is off with sensuality and desire, but I don't have a clear picture as to why it is. How would you articulate it in a way that I can see? Because people are constantly saying, no, look,
Yeah.
The
so
life
basically
filled with
what you're
sensuality
asking is, how can you show the benefit of being free from sensuality to a person who is refusing to give up sensuality? So the only way for them to see the benefit of it is to give it up. And there was a sutta that says, it's like a person at the bottom of the mountain wants to know what is the view like from the top. I mean, I can describe it to you, but only way for you to know is to do what I'm telling you to do in terms of follow the instruction and free yourself from desire, and then you'll see it for yourself. Any other answer I give you, even if it's the right answer for me, will not be understood by you because you're still not free from it.
It's a lot like talking to addicts, isn't it?
Well, in a way, that's
mentioned
what sensuality is.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Addiction that we know is
Yeah.
just the extension of the same principle of
Exactly.
sensuality. Yeah.
But you can have faith in the sangha, for example, because this is the people that you see. You guys seem pretty happy. You have.
Yeah,
gone
but
through
again,
such a
that's all.
radical change.
Again, that is all secondary. That can be a
But
pleasing
yeah.
sight to you, but fundamentally, if you are not making the internal effort to restrain your mind, calm it down, understand it, makes no difference. It's just a pleasing sight, nothing else. Just an agreeable thing.
Because otherwise it's shifting responsibility from yourself
Exactly.
to others.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
But you said I'd be happy, so
Well, the Buddha said you'll be happy
yeah.
if you free yourself from things that are pressuring you and making you act and controlling you.
But you
So
have to
you've
do it
never
yourself.
had a complaint like this. So I have freed myself from all craving, and yet I'm not happy. So you've never heard anyone say that.
No, that's impossible.
That's
'cause
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They leave Buddhism, don't they?
Because if you remove the source of suffering, the gateway of suffering, there can be no suffering.
But is happiness something we should strive for, or is it peace?
It depends what you define exactly.
Because
Is peace what's making you happy? Is being calm, not controlled, not perturbed by the changes in your mind, by the changes? Is that what making you happy, or is satisfying my desires making me happy? That's why, just do what makes you happy. It's not a standard that you would want the world to follow.
because happiness can actually just lead to more suffering because we crave more happiness.
Exactly. So it takes wisdom to recognize what beneficial happiness is. Yeah.
Basically, it seems very extreme to me that basically for the sake of Dharma, it doesn't matter. The whole world can die just as long as I'm in Dharma. That's the extreme example, but that's what
What do you mean I'm in Dharma? I don't follow.
Well, that you're fully enlightened, you're not going to lie, and below the consequences.
Yeah, because they're not your responsibility. Why would the world die?
Other people are my responsibility. We're all interconnected. We're all one.
That's we disagree there. I think that's not. Everybody's, as the Buddha himself said, beings are owners of their own actions. There is no interconnectedness. You make your own choices and you take results for them.
So any other questions?
You went through a list, yeah?
Some